We are in the 4th week of a 5-week series called Motives. Our motives are the values, the drivers of our organization as Mosaic. And so if you're newer here or you haven't heard all of these, this is a great way to just get to know the foundations, the DNA, what we're about here in this community. So let's take a moment, if you would, and flash back to the early 90s. Some of you weren't here yet, okay? But you're gonna just pretend, okay? We just went back in time. It's the early 1990s. Who remembers AOL Messenger? Okay, yes. Who remembers setting up your first email and you know it was Hotmail? Okay, my first email address was lilnewme28 because my last name was Newman and Seinfeld was really big, and so everyone was like, if your last name was Newman, you like went for it. You went all in because everyone thought Newman was funny at the time. Who remembers the sound of the dial-up modem? Yeah, everyone could like do it, right? It's like, and it was like, we were talking about this at small group actually this week about how you would get kicked off if someone like called, the phone rang, like, you know, or somebody would else need to use the phone. I mean, you guys, it was so funny. But do you remember how hopeful it felt? How exciting it was to like get on there and be like, oh my gosh, I'm talking online. I remember I stopped buying books for college because I just was reading things on the internet. I know you guys might think that was too early. It was too early. It was 2002 that I was doing that. But I was like, I can just read things on the internet. I don't actually have to have all these books anymore and spend all this money. So there was this sense of hopefulness. And that hopefulness was encapsulated by so many of the early founders, website founders, and the early creators of the internet. In fact, one man, which I didn't realize that there was a person that was in charge of creating the World Wide Web. Raise your hand if you already knew that. But Tim Berners-Lee was credited with creating the World Wide Web as a concept. And he really stuck with this over time. He actually created a nonprofit foundation and really has never made a lot of money on the concept and the original foundation. But when he created this in the early 90s, back when we were just beginning to imagine what this would look like, it was probably even the late 80s, he was filled with hope as well. He said, the web is a platform for endless possibility. It's up to us to shape it into one that is both inclusive and empowering. The web does not connect machines, it connects people. The goal of the web is to serve humanity. We build it now so that those who come to it later will be able to create things that we cannot ourselves imagine. Yep. That did happen, didn't it? We've heard so many times that when there's a new technology that there's a sense of like utopia that's possible, right? Like as it emerges, even with AI, there's this sense of like abundance. Like we could do so much good. We could create all this equality. Human beings could be connected. We could democratize access to information, and this is going to be so amazing, right? We've heard this before, haven't we? And so the early days of the internet were really doing that. But when we actually realize, like over time, what new technologies do, even the wheel was a new technology, right? Or fire was a new technology, if you think about it. And then all the way through to industrialization and the invention of cars and planes, and then television and all the new things that we have in our pockets, right? Our phones, computers, all of that. Each time a new technology emerges, it simply amplifies what's like already good and what's already bad. Last year, it was the 35th anniversary of the World Wide Web. It's almost hard to imagine life without it now, but Tim Berners-Lee wrote an article reflecting on what he had intended and what had actually happened. So I want to read this to you. He says, 3.5 decades ago, when I invented the web, wow, what a statement. Its trajectory was impossible to imagine. There was no roadmap to predict the course of its evolution. Underlying its whole infrastructure was the intention to allow for collaboration, foster compassion, and generate creativity, what I term the 3 C's. It was a tool to empower humanity. And the first decade of the web fulfilled that promise. The web was decentralized with a long tail of content and options. there was small, localized communities. It provided individual empowerment and fostered huge value. And I think a lot of us agree that there was so much good in the beginning. But in the past decade, he says, instead of embodying these values, the web has instead played a part in eroding them. The consequences are increasingly far-reaching. From the centralization of platforms to the AI revolution, the web serves as the foundational layer of our online ecosystem, an ecosystem now reshaping the geopolitical landscape, driving economic shifts, and influencing the lives of people around the world. You can hear that he is using some very big, somewhat vague language to say, so it didn't work out how I thought it would, right? He's having to admit that. And we all have observed that over the years, whether it was like just the original, the dot-com boom, right, at the end of the 90s and early 2000s. And then there was the bubble, the burst there. That was kind of the beginning of like, oh, okay, there's a lot of money in this. How are people actually going to treat it? But it hasn't turned out how we imagined. And in fact, as much as like, I know for me, I will have a question, and one of the first times, I mean, if someone's with me, I might ask them, but when we have a question about something, we often just like pull out our phone, right? And we go to Google. And for the most part, we can be fairly sure that if we know that this source is reputable, that's probably true. But just as much as we can access helpful information, we can also be completely confused, bewildered, distracted by misinformation. There's also just this pervasive sense that we don't know who to trust. We don't really know, like, every time you read something on the internet, you kind of like want to reference your references because you're like, is this real? I don't know. I don't want to be putting this out on social media or quoting this statistic to people. How do I really know what's true? So all this access to information means that there's so many questions about what is real information, what's really true. And this meaningful connection that we had in the beginning when we were first setting up our emails and when we were first talking on AOL Messenger, and that feeling of like knowing that we're talking to a real person, now it feels almost like we're tethered, we're bound to this device that if we put it down and we leave it at home, we kind of feel a little bit of panic. We're a little worried about what we're missing out on. This idea that I can be connected now feels like a little bit like a tether, right? Like we're tied to it. And it's like, oh, when I said connected, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean tied. I meant I wanted to opt in. And so it hasn't really worked out how we thought. And it turns out that the internet and AI and all other modern technologies or ancient technologies were never really meant to solve the human connection problem. New technologies can't help us be more connected. All they can do is accelerate and amplify what's already in the human heart and mind. That's all a technology can do. So the responsibility for loving each other, staying engaged, staying connected, it's still on us. It was on us before the internet. It's still on us now. So is that good news? I don't know. But it's the news. So if you're a follower of Jesus, or you're just a person who's like, I'm on the journey. I don't know where I stand with God, but I'm a person and I believe in goodness. I believe in morality. I believe in ethics. Then you know that we need human connection, that from a biological evolutionary standpoint, we need each other to survive. And as Christians, we're called to be in the world, to love one another, and to love the world. And that love is mostly, if not always, inconvenient. The engagement that is required asks something of us. We're meant to be salt and light. Salt, flavoring things, flavoring the world. Light, meaning bringing light into darkness where there was no light before. And so we have to engage in order to be the things that God has asked us to do. But if you think about it, like, you might be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, Sarah. Like, you might kind of go, yeah, I can see, like, I know that I'm supposed to do that. But if you think about taking a step in that direction of like engagement, where are you engaging? So often it's using the same technology that feels so exhausting, right? Maybe it's like, oh, I need to send someone a text or call somebody. And we feel like the edges of our relationships over the last few decades have really gotten frayed. It feels harder right now. So here's this call, this human need and this Christian call to engage and connect with each other, and yet the means through which we do it are often part of the problem. And it feels like, wait, just how do I even start the conversation? Maybe it's somebody you haven't talked to in a while, or maybe it's a topic that feels fraught with problems, with tension. It's like, what do I do? How do I even have this conversation? Many of us have been in tense holiday meals, right? Where you can tell there's like different viewpoints and there's just not room for more than one view at that table. So it's in our families, it's in our friendships or workplaces, right? Like people are in the employee lounge and they're talking about somebody, or like maybe it's a political figure, or maybe it's someone in the office and they're talking, and then the person walks in, or a person with a different view or something, and everyone gets quiet, and it's like we don't really remember almost how to do this anymore. Did we ever know? Our liberal country was supposed to be about free thinking, right? And it's supposed to be about free speech, and the ability to like have civil discourse was a uniquely American concept. This idea of like the Enlightenment, right? That we're enlightened now and we can discuss ideas and not just attack people. We can make a better world, a better and better and better and better world. That's what America was built on. That's what this liberalism concept is about. But it just feels like it's so much harder to do right now. And it feels like there's kind of two responses that most of us tend to step into. So what are those two responses? Most of the time, we feel like we're going to step into attack mode or we're going to retreat. Now, if you think about that from like just a biological perspective, when you're stressed out, you have fight or flight, right? Your sympathetic nervous system is like, this looks bad and scary. So I'm going to fight you so I can make this go away, or I'm going to retreat. So those are our two most common responses. Fighting looks like polarization. It feels like picking a side. It's picking a side in a interpersonal argument where you know, like maybe there's two people aren't getting along and it feels like you have to pick a side. In the workplace, in your family, or you have to pick a side from the political perspective, right? You have to choose. You can't just be in the middle, right? And so we see like this horseshoe effect in politics where you have people on the far right and the far left increasingly going up the horseshoe, and weirdly, they tend to act, the further they get up the horseshoe, the more radical they get, they actually have a lot of the same behaviors. They weirdly end up hating a lot of the same people, which is so strange. But they don't like each other either. And so they have a lot of these similar behaviors. And so that polarization is like, I'm safe when I have a tribe of people that are like me, and we can all kind of go after the enemy together. We are going to choose the fight mode. And so the thing that's happening at that same time that I think we know, but it bears repeating once again, is that all these companies that are, the platforms for communication, they are corporations that benefit from your engagement. How do you engage? You click, you share an emoji, you comment, you share, and what gets you to comment or share? An emotion. And what are the emotions that are most common, that they're like, are most engaging? Fear and anger, right? So that's what this thing is built on. The profitability of these companies is built on how much fear and how much anger you feel. So if you pause right now and you think about some of the last things that you saw on social media that were political or that were like, somebody that you're upset with, maybe it's someone in the community, some policy that's getting put out locally, think about the emotion that you felt. Did you feel fear? Did you feel anger? Because the algorithm is winning if you felt that, right? We want to notice that our response is not just what is the information coming across and what should I do about it, but just noticing the emotion that we feel, noticing what response we have in that moment. Do we want to fight? Do we want to run away? What's our response? And giving ourselves that pause because, again, the system is designed to elicit a response from you so that you will engage, because all of that is making someone money. Do we love that? No, we don't love that, right? So part of it is our pausing, our ability to self-reflect in that moment actually gives us the power back, right? That's taking our power back when we say, I'm not going to just get mad or get scared and push this thing out further into the world. I'm going to notice this emotion that I'm having, and I'm going to give it a second. I need to reinterpret it through my personal values, through the lens of being a Christian. I need to pause. Something that Paul said that I think is important, and he talked about this a lot. He was writing to the Corinthians, and he was saying something that feels so crazy. He said, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. Does that feel impossible? Was it even possible then? It's like, what do we mean by that? Part of unity isn't necessarily agreement, right? Because of how we have the technology and the way that we interact, we think that in order to be united, we have to agree. And we actually feel fearful when we don't agree with somebody. When we meet someone who doesn't necessarily land politically, ideologically, morally where we do, we're like, I don't really know what to do with you. We feel this tension. And so I think one of the things that we have to decide is, does my theology, does my relationship with God, does my personal peace require agreement with everyone around me? Does everyone around me need to agree with me for me to be okay? Or am I called to be light, which is the opposite of darkness? Am I called to be salt in the world? Because if you are called to be light, if you're called to be salt, if you're called to be different than the world, then you can assume that the way that you would react, the way that you would think about things is actually going to be very different. You would expect disagreement in your interactions. And so you don't have to feel so angry or so afraid. You would be like, okay, I expect this. And you would even expect that in this room, if we're doing it right, that the people that are sitting next to you, in front of you and behind you, feel, believe, and act a little bit differently. They act out their Christian faith or their values a little bit differently than you, and that's good. And what we're united around is our relationship with Jesus and who we say Jesus is, or the fact that we're all on that journey together, right? We're united around those very simple foundational things, even if we don't agree. So polarization, like we've talked about, it's not just political. It is affecting everything. When we tolerate it, when we tolerate that fight response, and we allow ourselves to push out into the world the anger or the fear, when we click share, when we engage with that stuff in that way, then we're affecting everything. We're allowing ourselves to create a new baseline where high levels of anger, anxiety, fear, rage, isolation, that becomes the new normal. We don't want that. We don't want to be able to tolerate those high levels of anxiety and anger in ourselves. So one of the things that I love, and I appreciate this, John was talking, he was reminding the early Christians when he wrote his gospel. He said very simply, it was reminding everyone what Jesus said. He said in chapter 13, by this everyone will know that you are my, Jesus' disciples, if you love one another. So it's love, not polarization and attack, not fighting. It's love that demonstrates our commitment to Jesus to follow him. It's love. It's not being politically or religiously right. It does not say that you will know, that the world will know that you're my disciples because of how right you are, because of how angry you are, because of how deftly you maneuver your way through a conversation and how clever your responses are when somebody says something you disagree with. It's love. And yes, what does love look like? It might look like challenging something. It very much looks like standing up for people that are defenseless. But what does love look like? We're going to get into that a little bit. But that's how we know, that's how you know when someone is a disciple or follower of Jesus, is when they love each other and love the world. The second response that we have, though, is the flight. It's running away. And what does flight feel like? It doesn't necessarily feel like I'm afraid. It feels like cynicism. It's like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like it's worth it, right? It's kind of self-protectively shrinking back into your own world. It's maybe being in an echo chamber or simply just not engaging politically or with an issue, right? This might be in a family or workplace situation. Somebody is having a disagreement and you're kind of in the mix, but you're like, I'm not gonna take a side. Now, sometimes it feels like the right choice and sometimes it really is to just say, you know what, I'm not gonna get involved with this, right? Like, and that's why this is hard, is because flight or cynicism can feel like wisdom. It can feel like maturity to stand back. And again, sometimes it is. But we want to be able to say, is this me self-protecting? Is this me needing to take action, needing to be a bringer of peace, bringing light, bringing love into the situation? Or am I withholding the goodness that's inside of me, that God has put inside of me, that is inside of me, right? Am I withholding that from this situation by withdrawing? Sometimes we are, right? Sometimes when you're sitting at the table in a family discussion, there is like a pervasive belief that is not good. It's not good for human flourishing. Sometimes we need to speak up. We don't need to challenge everything, but sometimes we have to go, well, we do think this, right? Or like establish some common ground. Sometimes we do need to engage a little bit. Think about the last time that you had an opportunity to say something, that like a situation, maybe interpersonal, workplace, community, family, political, there was an opportunity for you to say something and you just didn't, right? You decided that you were like, I don't know, I'm just not gonna go there. I'm just not gonna say anything. Part of you is glad you avoided the conflict, right? You're like, whew, dodged a bullet. But do you know that other part of you that feels like you should have done something? Like I should have spoken up and like I missed an opportunity? There's some regret there. There's a feeling that maybe you didn't live out your values, that you didn't do what you know you needed to do. And so we want to be people that have the internal fortitude to do what we need to do, to speak up, to speak with patience, to speak with kindness, but to actually engage. Not to fight, but not to completely withdraw, right? Isn't that an unbelievable tension? It feels really hard, okay? Let's just say that. So the expectation is not that we're gonna do this right or do it well all the time, but the expectation is that we would try, right? So I want to talk with us about this third way. What does it look like? What is Jesus calling us to do? What does practicing the way of Jesus look like when it comes to engaging interpersonally in our relationships and in our culture? Jesus, first of all, modeled this, didn't he? You guys know, like, Jesus would say stuff, and you're like, dude, no wonder they killed you. Like, he's speaking to the power brokers. He's talking to the Pharisees and all these leaders, and these guys have power on power. And he's like, you, woe to you, like curses. You're a whitewashed tomb. You look great on the outside, and inside it's deadness and skeletons and spiders. What? Right now, we look at those people and we're like, yeah, those people were like not good, right? But at the time, they were held up as like the pinnacle of morality. Everyone was like, oh, wow, they're so good, they're so holy, we should try to be like them. The young boys in that day, in that era, in Jesus' era, they were all kind of like hoping to be rabbis, right? It was like the best of the best got to be the rabbi, got to be the teacher. It was like this incredible honor. And so they were honored politically, they were honored religiously, they were honored in the community, and here's Jesus like going for them and saying that they're like completely fake, right? Calling them performers, hypocrites, saying you guys are just actors. What? Right? Like it's like, yes, they did want to put a stop to Jesus. He was constantly engaging. He was also engaging with incredible kindness, incredible patience, the people that everyone else hated. Like remember Zacchaeus? You guys remember this story? Maybe you've heard it. Maybe you haven't. There was a man who was a tax collector. They were seen as like the ultimate traitor of the Jewish community because they were working with the oppressive Roman government. In order to make money, they had to tax people beyond what the Roman tax was. So whatever they taxed up beyond the tax was their profit, is in my understanding. And so they were just sort of hated, right? They were like, the Romans don't want them because they're Jewish, but the Jewish people don't want them either. And here's this guy, he's short in stature. He is like a major social outcast for so many reasons. And he's literally climbing up in this tree to see Jesus. And Jesus is like, everyone is around him, talking to him. And he looks up in this tree and he says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. Like he invites himself over for food. And like, whoa, like he picked out the person that everyone's like, why would you go to his house? Why would you hang out with him? And so here he is rebuking the most holy, right, people, and meanwhile finding the most outcast, the most disregarded, the most outside the community person, and engaging them and eating with them and breaking all the social rules. That's how Jesus engaged. That's what love looked like. So we have a model. We kind of know a little bit about what this looks like. And it's not going to win you like any awards, is it? You might not even win an award with our local community foundation because it's going to be so outside the box, right? And I'm not saying that you're going to rebuke the hypocrites because I don't know that many of us like have that much of a moral leg to stand on, The only person that could really do that is Jesus. Most of us find ourselves in hypocrisy at some way. But this version of Jesus that engages everyone in a way that's like so surprising, in a way that's breaking those rules, he led for us. And so one of the ways that he did that, I want to give us like a few key actions for engaging in this redemptive way. If the ways that we go through the world are simply amplifying and accelerating what's already in your heart and your mind, if the tools that we have available to us just make what's in our hearts louder and bigger and more impactful, don't we want that whatever is in our heart and mind to be good? Don't you want it to be good? Yes. You want it to be good. You don't want it to be dark. You don't want it to be evil. Because as soon as you open up your phone or your laptop or your email or you check the news and you have the opportunity to amplify something, what is already in your heart is about to get a microphone. So curating and cultivating goodness in your heart is where it starts, right? It's not up to the politicians. It's not up to the technology. It's up to us. So what do? 2 things I would recommend. I would recommend wrestling with God, like Jacob. I would recommend getting on the mat with God. We see the mothers and fathers of our faith doing this. In fact, Israel means he who wrestles with God. This nation that we as Christians got grafted into, the promises and the blessings of the Israeli people, of the Hebrew people, our legacy is wrestling with God. Now, as an Enneagram 8 who likes a good spar, who likes a good conversation, like let's raise the heat a little bit, I love this. This is so my jam. I'm like, yep, I am so here for wrestling with God. I love that Israel is like a verb, right? And I looked up the origin of my name, and my name is also like Sarah, means to wrestle, rule, and prevail. It's like, I'm like, my name is a verb, like, of course it is. And so I love this. Like, this is our Christian heritage, that we wrestle with God. And so just to give you a little, reminder here, I love this little section of Jacob wrestling with God here in Genesis. It says, so Jacob was left all alone, and there was a man who wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he struck the socket of Jacob's hip and dislocated it as they wrestled. That feels unfair. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. And that Jacob actually means like deceiver, or like one who grasps the heel, kind of. It wasn't necessarily a great interpretation. The man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed." So he gives him a new name in this blessing. And Jacob says, "Tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed Jacob there. So this was this man coming to say, like, in the form, and some theologians say that he's literally wrestling with Jesus here, a form of Jesus. But this was Jacob wrestling with God. And he received a blessing. And one of the ways that we are transformed in our Christian faith is to simply engage with God, right? It's to get on the mat. And for me, what this looks like, and I'm curious for you, but for me, what wrestling with God, it's like when I don't like something that's happening, when I don't like what he is doing, when I want something that I'm not getting. God likes this. He wants us to wrestle with him. Why would he name an entire nation, Israel, and then like graft in another whole group of people into this thing if he's not super into a wrestling match with us, you guys? He's not trying to have polite conversations, okay? And I'm so relieved by that, because when there's a problem in the world, when there's incredible injustice in my life or is something in my family, I am not trying to have a neat little proposal that I submit on email, okay, and have it reviewed 2 weeks later and then have somebody else give me some feedback. No, I'm going to have a strongly worded conversation right now. And that's what we're being invited into, is to have that, to let your emotions out. Maybe you're not, you don't want to like yell or use 4-letter words or whatever. Maybe you just need to know that God cares about your opinion. And I'm letting you know he does. He wants you to share it. He does not need the cleaned up version. All right? If you read the Psalms, you see David saying some pretty unbelievable things. He always wraps it up by being like, "I know you're God, I know you love me, but also this stinks. And I don't think you're good at your job." And I think it's fair for us to say those things to God. He wants us to wrestle with him. Another thing that we can do to start with our own hearts, right? When we're thinking about engagement, when we're thinking about the fact that whatever's inside of us gets accelerated and amplified when we're using technology, when we're engaging with people, when we're curating what's inside of us, we wrestle with God and simply just get away with God, especially when there's a lot of stress, when there's a lot going on. We need to prioritize that. Jesus modeled this as well when he was inundated with demands from people. People wanted to make him into a hero. They wanted to make him into a celebrity. There were so many things that they needed from him. There were so many people to heal. There were so many problems to solve. And it says here in Luke 5, the news about Jesus spread all the more. Great crowds came to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses, yet he frequently withdrew to the wilderness to pray. He needed to remember who he was. He needed to remember where he was from and where he was going. He needed to be able to calm his heart down. Because otherwise, what do? We end up polarized, making enemies out of people, or we end up cynical and withdrawing. And so Jesus intentionally withdrew, not be out of cynicism, but out of that starting with his own heart, curating what was going on inside of him, making sure that what was amplified through his teaching and through his life was actually good. He had to work so hard to do that, and so do we. As we're starting with our own hearts, I want to give us like 5 kind of key principles here, because I think we can say, let's wrestle with God, let's get away with God. Those are really important things. But as we begin to do that, right? As we begin to go, okay, I've been away with God, I've wrestled with God, I don't have an answer yet. How many of us have wrestled with God and we walk away with the same questions and maybe more questions? Right? That you're like, okay, I wrestled with God, I did that thing, now what? Right? I don't know what to do. I have to go live my life. I have to go to this lunch meeting. I have to go to work. I have to make dinner for my kids, whatever. We can at least say, okay, I want to live with these intentions, these virtues. So I want to give you 5 that we can begin to cultivate in our hearts as we're wrestling with God, as we're getting away with him, and we just don't have an answer yet. The first one is wisdom. James 3 says, the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without pretense. And so what we're seeing here is that wisdom is not just like knowing stuff, right? Wisdom is an approach to how we interact, whether it is at the macro level, politically, culturally, or it's interpersonally, just one-on-one. We are gentle, we have mercy, we don't try to lead with arrogance or what we know. It helps us to discern, right? Sometimes it's like, what should I say? How should I say it? When should I say it? Giving us that moment to pause. Wisdom does that for us. Another virtue or intention to lead with is curiosity. Jesus asked hundreds of questions in the Gospels. And I just think that's so fascinating. And yes, that was a tool the rabbis used a lot, right? So somebody would ask a question and then the rabbi would respond with another question. And they would sort of have this volley of questions. But it also demonstrates Jesus' curiosity, that he wasn't like, someone didn't ask him a question and he didn't just spout off what he knew, right? He allowed the question to lead that person into deeper reflection, right? To help them access what they knew, to help make an expert out of them. He let them be a leader. He let them even at times like teach, not necessarily teach him, but teach, because he was leading with that curiosity. When we're curious, we get to bypass the agreement requirement, right? There's this social contract that we have right now, culturally, that's like, oh, I have to agree with you in order for us to have a relationship. If I'm curious about you, if I'm curious about who you are, I'm curious about how did you come to that conclusion, then I don't have to worry about reaching agreement. I can just be curious. We can lead with that. And you know what? You'll probably have some things that you end up agreeing on. A third thing that I personally, I've talked about this before, that I always have to work on is patience. In 1 Corinthians 13, we're told that love is patient among many things. But patience is often, our impatience is revealed in our anxiety. Have you ever noticed that sometimes your anxiety is just impatience? You're like, oh, I'm really worried about this. And it actually means you just want the answer faster. You don't want to wait, right? You don't want to wait for this person to like live out this question or this situation in their lives. You don't want to wait for the new policy to be enacted. You don't want to wait for the politicians to kind of slowly figure it out. You don't want to wait for time and history to heal something. You just want it figured out now. I have realized that so many times my anxiety is simply impatience. And what if I just said, okay, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to allow God to do something. Now, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take whatever action I can or need to, but sometimes I just need to be patient. And when we're engaging with people, when we're engaging with culture, it's a long game. And so that's why we need this fourth thing, perseverance, especially when it comes to major cultural change, right? If you think about people who, like Martin Luther King Jr., right, in the civil rights movement, anyone who has furthered civil rights, human rights in the world has had to be patient, because it was not going to be one march. It was not going to be one session of Congress. It was not going to be one boycott. It was going to be like protest after protest, showing up after showing up, allowing themselves to be even sometimes sprayed with fire hoses, right? Like, it was extremely inconvenient. Some of them were getting jailed. Some were even killed, right? And we can look back to the leaders of the Christian faith, that they experienced that kind of suffering and those kinds of trials when they were trying to lead the revolution of Christianity, right? This revolution of love, of believing in Jesus. It was so radical. And so when we are living this out, we need perseverance. We need to wait. We need to be able to bear up under incredibly adverse circumstances. So we need patience and perseverance. And finally, we need humility, because so much of the time we like to think within our polarized selves, we like to say, oh, I know the right thing, or I've researched this a lot, right? I know a lot about this. And we like to just have our little like square of knowledge, our little like, acreage that we've camped out. Like, this is what I know. I know these things. And you can ask me all about it and I'll tell you what I think. And I sound really smart. And it just keeps us like disconnected from each other, right? There's that verse that Paul says, he says, knowledge puffs up or creates arrogance, but love builds up. Love actually edifies and encourages people. Just knowing things, it just makes you puffy, right? It makes you arrogant. If you're puffy, then we can just put a little pin and you can deflate. You can deflate when someone knows more than you. You can deflate when someone can prove you wrong or you don't have a great response, right? Truly showing up with love allows us to build each other up. And so this is why we need humility. Humility to go, I don't know everything. Humility to say, this is my understanding or interpretation of this scripture right now, and I might be wrong and I might change. Keeping our hands open. I think Darren says this, strong opinions loosely held, I think is the phrase that he says. And I really appreciate that approach, right? It's like, I really researched this and I understand and I care a lot about these things, but I'm willing to learn more. I'm willing to enrich my position through what you see in your experience and how you view this thing. So I think that humility is one of the most important things. So finally, another action that we can take after we have wrestled with God and started with a heart, after we've looked at these 5 intentions and virtues, we can discuss ideas, not people. Eleanor Roosevelt said it really well. Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. That's gossip. Gossip is the language of the powerless. There's gossip happening in your workplace whenever people feel like they can't do anything about a situation, right? You gossip about somebody who has some difficult traits and they don't take feedback, right? And if you try to say something to them, they don't want to hear it, and so people gossip. People gossip about political stuff. They gossip about family members, right? Don't take a powerless position, right? You can engage in a loving and Christian way. You are going to need to withdraw and go be with God about what you should do. But we don't want to discuss people. We don't want to attack people. We want to be a great mind that discusses ideas. We want to stay there. And so even when other people are in our families or workplaces or communities and they're kind of getting into that, they sound powerless. They're doing the gossip thing. They're talking about people. They're attacking a political figure. It's like, okay, what does that do? What is the help in that, right? Oh, you feel good. You got a dopamine hit off your rage. Okay, congratulations, right? What we actually want to do is like help people bring the quality of the conversation up and say, okay, but what if we just talked about ideas? Like, you can just ask a question, like, but what's the idea behind that? Or what's the policy that's really frustrating about that? Just bring the quality of the conversation up by helping people think about ideas instead of simply gossiping and acting powerless. So when in doubt, right, start with your heart and discuss ideas, right? Maybe you're just not sure what to do, but we can just go, okay, I'm going to start with my own heart, make sure that what's inside there is good when it gets amplified, and I'm going to make sure that I'm discussing ideas and not attacking people. How about those as a couple of things? What's at stake? I just want to briefly touch on this. If we decide not to engage, if we decide to become polarized, if we decide to opt for fight or flight, we take our most base, most primal biological wiring and we just do fight or flight, right? What happens if we do that? Well, personally, we're going to shrink. We're going to become more brittle. We're going to become more isolated. We're more cynical relationally. Our relationships start to kind of crack and fall apart. Our churches, our community organizations, our workplaces start to fray and even come apart because those relational connections aren't there. People aren't having the hard conversations anymore. It's not that you have all the hard conversations, but you have the critical conversations. There's this distance that comes from avoidance, right? We just begin to increasingly create distance between each other. But we know that we become sharper, we become better through engagement, right? Proverbs says that as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. When iron is sharpening iron, there are sparks, right? That's okay. That's all right. It's okay to have some of that. We know that we're sharpening each other. So we can't be Christians in a room by ourselves. We just can't. We can't love one another in a room by ourselves. Christianity requires engagement. Finally, Christians, imagine a world where Christians are no longer in conversations, where people who value the Beatitudes, the way of Jesus, people who value human life, who value the cultural values of Christianity, the morals of Christianity. What if we were no longer in the political spaces? We weren't speaking up in our families and our workplaces. What if we just completely disengaged? What if we became really tribalistic and we just were like, oh, I'm only going to talk to Christians. I'm only going to talk to the people that agree with me. And we're no longer involved. We're no longer the yeast of the kingdom, slowly working the good ideas through the culture. What if we were to just pull away, right? We would leave the worst ideas to be continuously amplified and accelerated. There would be no stopping it. And so we can see that we are needed. Our voices of love and compassion, wisdom, patience, curiosity, humility, those are needed in the world. We don't want to just let it run. We want to actually engage and allow God's Spirit to come through our presence and influence the world around us. It really does make a difference if we engage well. And so as we put this into practice, I want to invite us to simply just consider three of these, the three steps here that I offered you. Maybe right now what you're doing is like, okay, I can tell I've been really wound up lately. I've been wound up with this thing with my family. I've been wound up with this thing at work. I am kind of in the fight or flight mode. I am feeling the fear and I'm feeling the anger. And if I take action in this place, I'm going to make something worse, right? I'm just participating in the system as it is without making it better. So I need to start with my own heart. Maybe I need to wrestle with God because I think something's unfair, or maybe I simply just need to step away and allow the silence and the presence of just me and God to allow that truth to surface. Maybe you need to choose one of those engagement virtues. Maybe one of those stands out to you. Maybe it's curiosity. You're like, ugh, I've been kind of like focused on what I know. I've been focused on my knowledge. I need to be more curious. Maybe I've been a little bit anxious and I can tell it's actually impatience and I need to be more patient. This is going to be like one of my biggest ones every time. And I'll probably like preach on this a lot because I need to hear it. I need to be more patient. So you're hearing me say that and you can hold me to it. Maybe you need to choose one of those virtues. Maybe you simply need to focus on talking about ideas instead of talking about people. Maybe that hit you. Maybe you're like, oh, shoot, I kind of do that. I'm a little bit gossipy. I kind of go into attack mode. I kind of get a hit off of making some kind of sarcastic, snarky comment about somebody. Maybe it's, again, work, family. Maybe it's a political figure. I get pulled into that. I love my clever answers. I get some juice on that, right? And it's like, oh, no, I need to be up here. I need to bring up the quality, intentionality of conversations by discussing ideas and not people. Maybe it's something as simple as that. Notice what it is for you that you need to do and the step that you need to take here. So I want to conclude, bring up our worship team and communion servers.